Our top story this morning, once again, though, out of Minneapolis.
Yeah, tensions continuing to escalate there. Another incident, another shooting involving a federal agent. Last night came a week after the deadly shooting of Renee Good. The Department of Homeland Security claims the agent shot an undocumented immigrant from Venezuela during what it calls a targeted traffic stop. While trying to detain the man, DHS agents apparently were attacked by two other people from a nearby apartment who, along with the migrant, attacked the officer with a snow shovel and a broom handle. This is the account given to us from DHS. Fearing for his life, the agent fired shots, hitting the migrant in the leg. That's also according to DHS. The agent and the migrant taken to the hospital. The other two people involved were taken into custody. After the shooting, dozens of protesters gathered at the scene, confronting federal agents and swarming a Border Patrol vehicle. Fireworks were thrown at federal officers, who responded with flashbangs and gas canisters. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey spoke late last night, calling on protesters to remain peaceful.
What I can tell you for certain is that this is not sustainable. This is an impossible situation that our city is presently being put in. And at the same time, we are trying to find a way forward to keep people safe, to protect our neighbors, to maintain order. And we're in a position right now where we have residents that are asking the very limited number of police officers that we have to fight ICE agents on the street, to stand by their neighbors. We cannot be at a place right now in America where we have two governmental entities that are literally fighting one another. For anyone that is taking the bait tonight, stop. That is not helpful. Go home. We cannot counter Donald Trump's chaos with our own brand of chaos. And I have seen thousands of people throughout our city peacefully protesting. For those that have peacefully protested, I applaud you. For those that are taking the bait, you are not helping. And you are not helping the undocumented immigrants in our city. You are not helping the people that call this place home.
That's Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey late last night in the overnight hours. Joining us live from Minneapolis, MS Now reporter Nnamdi Egwuonwu. Nnamdi, what is the latest there? We have reason, of course, to be skeptical of any official account of what happened, given the initial account of what happened in Renee Good's shooting. We've since seen the video and able people to draw their own conclusions. Is there any other information about what exactly happened last night?
Well, we know in accounts provided by both the Department of Homeland Security as well as the local police chief here, there seems to be at least some parallels that paint a picture of what led to the clash we saw here last night. Like you mentioned, it appears that ICE agents were attempting to make a stop of a Venezuelan immigrant. While doing that, a struggle, in the words of the police chief last night, ensued. During that struggle, the officer fired his weapon and struck, at least according to the Department of Homeland Security, struck the Venezuelan suspect he was trying to apprehend in his leg. This is where the clash and the scene began to evolve once that was happening. I want to remind you, this was a week after Renee Good. People here have already been very upset. Tensions have been very high, and we saw that boil over last night. And the fiercest, violent, and often most volatile clashes between federal law enforcement personnel and protesters happened right here. Willie, I want to show you, you can see remnants of some of this here. All of these white marks you see on the ground here, these are all pepper balls. That's what they look like once they hit the ground. If you look here, we can still see what is called a blast ball. It's okay to touch because this was used hours ago, but essentially what this does is it creates a huge explosion sound, it shines lights, and most notably, it deploys several rubber pellets. So the fact that you're still seeing some of this shows you just how long it took law enforcement to get this crowd under control. Around midnight last night, we know the police chief formally declared this an unlawful assembly, and we started to see even more of these crowd control measures being used to really contain what I will tell you from our firsthand account, was a very angry, upset, and violent several dozen group of protesters right in this general area. This is only cleared out in the last few hours. We were here about 3 hours ago. I can tell you that this silence you're seeing, the lack of people on this street is new. This is new. Up until the early hours of this morning, police were still trying to contain this crowd, who again we're filled with residents here that have been very upset and are pointing to this as just another example of violence from federal personnel, several thousand of whom have descended on the city over the last week.
Nambi, we saw in that soundbite from Mayor Fry, he was flanked by the police chief there, Brian O'Hara, who's been put in this position between, as the mayor suggested, protecting the city's residents and also helping in ways that it can, or perhaps helping its residents from ICE. What is that position that the police there find themselves in when incidents like you just described break out last night?
Well, I want to tell you, we've spoken to several, or gotten a temperature check from several members of the local police force here. And what they have told us is there is frustration mounting within that department. And the large reason why is because there's concerns that some of the tactics being used by federal personnel, the aggressive measures we saw last night, the use of items like this blast ball, that's going to result in more animus towards law enforcement generally. One officer specifically said to me that they're coming here and they're lighting wildfires and they're going to leave it up to us to clean the ashes. So that kind of describes the position that some of these local officers are in, where they're told, remember from the city, they're not to really coordinate with federal personnel, but they were the first on the scene here. It were local police that initially were responding to this before we saw a swarm of federal agents come here to try to then control this crowd. So they're in a tricky position of trying to de-escalate and keep tensions low, because both the police chief, Mayor Fry, Governor Walz, they're all very worried that if protests get too out of hand, if there are attacks from those protesters on these federal agents, that'll be cited as a reason to send even more personnel here, especially as the president has already toyed with the idea of citing the Insurrection Act. So a lot of concerns here, and a lot of local police frustrated by some of the actions they're seeing from their federal partners.
And you're right, the federal government already putting more officers there after the Renee Good shooting. MS Now reporter Nambi Igwanwu live from Minneapolis again this morning. Nambi, thanks so much. John, so you see in that initial report of what happened last night, again, we have a long way to go to fully understand what happened. Don't want to jump to conclusions, but a detailed account from DHS in which it blamed Joe Biden in its second or third sentence for allowing this man to be in the country from Venezuela. But there's reason, of course, for skepticism, because we saw Kristi Noem in the hours after Renee Good was shot, calling her a domestic terrorist, describing the ramming of the ICE officer, which we know now, seeing the video, didn't happen. So I think you can see why the frustration, not only from the protesters in the street of Minneapolis last night, who have now gone home at the urging of Mayor Fry, but also just nationally skepticism around these operations and the accounts given of incidents that come from them.
It'd be hard not to be, because the federal government, from the White House, the president, the vice president in the White House briefing room, put their thumb on the scale and instantly about trying to frame the events there last week. And to the point just made, that this administration could use these moments as an excuse to surge even more officers into Minneapolis to crack down further. Remember back in the spring when the National Guard was first deployed to Los Angeles, the White House officials, administration officials sort of somewhat openly were saying that they thought there'd be confrontations, which would allow them to do that and to have images of chaos that President Trump thought would be good for his political base. That didn't happen there. There's a chance it might be happening now in Minneapolis, though, of course, the anger from residents is understandable, and there's real suspicion as to the account obviously delivered last week as to how that went down, and certainly there'll be questions, David Rode, as to what happened last night. And let's emphasize again, there's a lot we don't know yet. It's going to take time. But let's talk about just the credibility of the federal government. I mean, it used to be when the feds got involved, it was sort of the gold standard, like the Department of Justice, the FBI, whomever it might be, partnering with local officials, state, city officials, to run an investigation thoroughly and fairly, to try to keep things calm while doing so. And right now, at least there in the Twin Cities, no one is giving the federal government the benefit of the doubt.
It's very different. And again, it's how ICE is operating. It's these traffic stops, the way they're doing it, standing in front of vehicles, the way local police don't do it. if there was body cam footage from this scuffle last night where these two people come out and supposedly attack the officer, that would help. And of course, wearing these masks is all just very unusual, and not, the public is not used to this. And then there was reporting yesterday from our colleagues Laura Barron-Lopez and Mark Santilla that the administration is considering now sending ICE into Maine, which has a very large Somali population. And that is just like a further, and we'll talk a theme this morning about escalation, which is sort of the go-to move of President Trump, it seems, the administration, whether it's here with ICE, whether it's Greenland, whether it's Iran.
Yeah, actually, Maine's Governor Janet Mills put out a video saying they hear they're coming and they're trying to communicate with federal authorities, not having luck, that they will be prepared, and they have notified the state police and the local police to follow the law every step of the way.